Okay. We are going to start American Revolution today. American Revolution. Okay. See, American Revolution is also taken as an independence movement. Independence from British rule. It's like an independence movement. It can also be taken as part of decolonization. Decolonization. These are various words we can use to describe American Revolution. But I think we understand American Revolution better or American independence movement better when we compare it with our own. When we compare it with our own. Okay. See, for us, what does independence mean? In fact, what independence means to us is similar to what independence means to many Asian countries and African countries. Okay, we can easily relate our independence movement to independence movements in Asia and Africa. But Latin American context is completely different. It is that we have to understand now. Latin American context is different. The entire Americas, okay, the entire Americas is called a New World. New World. Is the board visible? Okay, it is called New World. Why is it New World? It is discovered by Europeans. New. And when they went, they found there were already people. There were people already. But how did those people go before Columbus discovered or others discovered? They went long ago through migration from Siberia to Alaska and like this. Okay. So because we see in the map, because we don't see a globe, Siberia is this side and Alaska is another side. So we have the impression that they are too distant. They are on the two sides. They're not on the two sides. They're very close. Okay. So people migrated from Africa to Europe, Asia, and then from Siberia to Alaska, and then entered like this. This happened thousands of years ago. Okay. Okay, you can say around 60,000 years ago. At least the people who are there were left to Africa around 60 plus thousands of years ago. That is what is called out of Africa theory. Okay. So in a modern world, 1500 plus Europeans entered. So Europeans were far more advanced than the people who are already there, who are called natives. Natives. But when Columbus found that land, when he was trying to reach India, he thought he reached India, and so he called them Indians. Okay, so those people are also called Indians because Columbus thought that it was India he discovered. Okay, so there were already people, Indians. You can call them tribes, call them natives. Okay. So then Europeans went there. Okay. So natives and Europeans is the two groups are Indians and Europeans. These constituted elite. These constituted lower sections. Okay. The conflict between them was very violent. Many of them were killed, their lands taken away. Okay. So they were there. Many European countries occupied the entire New World. Okay, Spain, France, Portugal, many countries. Okay, this entire continent, Southern America, is called Latin America because uh, the language of the colonial powers was Latin. Okay. So now, what is the American independence here? Or what is the independence of the countries in the New World? The independence of the countries in the New World is not of the natives from the Europeans. Natives in that sense never got independence. Okay. The independence was vis-a-vis European elite in the New World versus European powers. This distinction has to be very clearly understood. So if Latin American countries became independent very early, it is not because the natives became independent. It is simply the elite of those countries cut their ties with the elite of the European countries. America is only an example. The English-speaking people from Britain went to that site and settled there. And the so-called American Revolution was about the independence of these 13 colonies from the British mainland. So who are these people? They were really advanced, connected to advanced civilization, in touch with the advanced civilization, English speaking. And if you trace the ancestors, their ancestors belong to England only. Okay, so it is like upper classes of America, upper classes, or more particularly land-owning classes in American colonies. These are called colonies, versus rulers or the upper classes in England. Okay. So there was nothing like colonial masters educating them, teaching them English, civilizing them, leaders emerging from them, and then throwing the British out. Okay. So it is between equally educated, enlightened, modern forces. Okay. So American independence, or for that matter, independence in any Latin American country, is not the same thing as independence either in Asian country or an African country. Okay. So it means its nature, character has to be completely different. Okay. Because it is a fight between two well-informed and enlightened or civilized groups, then small things become big issues, and modern terminology, modern ideals are used in the independence at a very, very early stage, which was 1770s, 1800. Okay. That is first part. Now tell me, do you have any questions on this discussion? Is this clear? Yes or no?
Sir, was there any opposition when they first colonized America?
There was so much of opposition, but the opposition by an extremely vulnerable and weak group. They were just killed. So they never became independent. It is like that. So there were natives and colonies and the people in European countries, or you can call them rulers. It is like that. It was a completely uneven, unequal contest.
So the same thing could have happened for India also. Like, why it did not happen?
Exactly. Thank you. Because they were few in number and Indians were so many. It was like that. And then India was an advanced civilization. But in Latin America, they were very primitive. India was advanced philosophically, technologically, Mughal rule. Before that, it was much more advanced. Latin America was not like that. Okay, it is just like what mainstream Hindus do to tribals. What happened to tribals? So they became castes or they became marginalized. So like that, there they were eliminated, more or less eliminated. So it was not natives' independence from Europeans. It was Europeans' independence from Europeans only. Colonists' independence from their mother countries. That is the reason why Latin American countries got independence much long ago, whereas many other countries got after World War II. Okay, is it clear? Sai, Srikar?
Sir, by looking at this, I can simply call it just an occupation. Nothing to talk about. Simply an occupation. We can call it simple term. That's all.
Occupation vis-a-vis the natives.
Yes, sir. Natives are
natives vis-a-vis the natives. Occupation. They were powerless. They were powerless.
They are eliminated. So
no. More or less
so why
marginalized.
So why we call as colonization? Because the unpowerful natives they colonize. That is why we are using colonization word.
Because the people who are born in America rebelled against those who were ruling from Britain.
Okay. The Indians
exactly
revolt.
And revolted.
In that context, we can call it colonization.
Yes, that is in the context you can call it decolonization.
Yeah, decolonization.
Because Britain no longer would control Americas.
For me, it's more looking like occupation.
That's fine, but then we should understand everybody is occupied. Everybody is occupier only. Who are Aryans? Aryans also are occupiers.
That's why. It's a time context.
It is just a matter of a matter of time. Muslims are foreigners if you take Aryans as natives. Aryans are foreigners if you take tribes as natives.
Yes. Fine.
So, colonists are foreigners. So that is why in that Garva, according to Garvapsi, if all of us have to go back, we all end up in Africa only.
Yes.
It is just a matter of time scale. Okay. Just a matter of time scale. Yes. Okay. But then very recent, for example, Aryans versus the British. So many years, thousands of years gap was there. But modern versus English, it's just hundreds of years. Okay. So can I go to the next section? Okay. Number one. Remember, American Revolution is second session. American Revolution is happening after English Revolution. English Revolution. English Revolution itself inspired American Revolution. Okay. What was the English Revolution about? English Revolution was about king down. King became a constitutional monarch. Okay. And what was the source of the trouble? King was imposing taxes and Parliament said no. Parliament said no at a very early stage, Magna Carta, 1215. Okay, but then king did not follow. Then Parliament said very clearly, no taxation without representation. No taxation without representation. So what was the fundamental principle behind this no taxation without representation? So we have to represent. You can only impose taxes with our consultation. That is what they started. And in the end, you have no right to tax and only we have to approve. So Glorious Revolution meant king no more had powers. Okay. So from no taxation without representation to only people are sovereign and only we can tax ourselves and you can't. That was a very important principle. And then Locke, by the time of Glorious Revolution, gave theoretical framework to the government. The idea that there are certain rights, freedom of speech, religious freedom. Okay, there are certain rights which cannot be taken away by the government. And that is called social contract. Social contract. That is, a state is coming out of the social contract. Government is there respecting the contract with the people. And what is the contract? We will rule you without taking away these rights. We will provide law and order, but without taking these rights. And the king has no divine right to rule. So divine right to rule, rejected. Absolute powers, rejected. Okay, and taxation meant people having a voice. All that happened during Glorious Revolution. Okay, at the end of 17th century. Okay, so these are called modern ideas. These are all ideas of what are called Age of Enlightenment. Age of Enlightenment. English Revolution comes under Age of Enlightenment. Okay, so this is about reasoning. Okay, and of course, before that, Reformation took place, questioning religion itself. Okay, Reformation also comes under Age of Enlightenment. Okay, so American elite is closely connected with the developments going on in Britain. Trade-wise, they are connected, governance-wise connected, ideas-wise connected. Books are being read. People are talking, discussing. Okay. So they were living in those world of new ideas. Okay. So where religion was questioned, monarchy was questioned, divine right to rule was questioned. And not that these people learned from the English. It is just, they were all closely connected. As I said, unlike as a part of a white man's burden to educate the black. It was not like that. They were all connected. Okay. So it was in this context. Some small events triggered so-called War of Independence. Small events triggered. Okay. See, history books sometimes, I mean, when you read American Revolution, you read only American Revolution. So they discuss as if it was one major event. But comparatively, compared to what happens in other countries, we can see they are extremely small events, but around that, a warfare took place. War between American colonies, which were 13 in number, and the British Army. Okay. What was the main triggering point? The triggering point was Britain imposed certain taxes. Which America did not like. Britain imposed taxes which America did not like. Why did Britain impose taxes? Because it was just before it took part in 2 wars. So it was in huge losses and it had to earn. So then it imposed taxes. But American colonies did not like. Okay. And then so in this discontentment, this is one, taxation is one thing. And another thing is about because American colonies are not represented in British Parliament, so companies in Britain would have an advantage compared to business classes in America, because companies in Britain would have access to power, like East India Company was well connected, but Americans won't have such a connection because they didn't have any role in the British Parliament. So British Parliament did certain things which were favorable to English company, which was affecting American merchants. So it means commercial clash. Okay. So this commercial clash also, and then higher taxes, gave rise to this demand that you can't do this to us. Okay. So the argument was being no taxation without representation. So one argument can be you give the representation. So let the king be king for all and let him be fair. That is one possibility. Okay, give actual representation, but maybe it won't have worked. Okay, because after all, there were so many colonies. How would you represent them? So anyway, alternatives were not worked out. So these people said no taxation without representation. And so remove these taxes and remove these policies that were hurting our commercial classes. That was petition from the Americans. But the king, along with the British Parliament, rejected it. So they called it rebellion. Okay. And then there was a fight between the British army and the army of the colonies. These people are colonists, not colonialists. These people are colonists. Okay. And the army is Continental Army. So Continental Army versus the British Army fight. So the battle that lasted many years, at the end of which these 13 colonies became independent states. Okay, if this is clear, we will examine the events. Okay, tell me clearly. You can ask me questions. First of all, do you understand this is a very simple issue?
Also, the mother country could grant independence easily because it maybe it was its own citizens.
Exactly. This is what happened. European elite versus elite of the Americas, but European descent. So that is why you can see extremely small events, but they make a big issue out of these small events, exaggerate and then draw inspiration like that. So it's a clash between the two privileged. Okay. Now we will go to the actual events. Tell me, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now I'm going to a PDF document in the computer because I couldn't fix this iPad problem. Okay. Okay. Britain waged certain wars. One war was called 7 Years' War. This took place between 1756 and 63, and between Britain and France. Okay. And then there was also another war with the natives, which Britain launched. So there were 2 wars. In these 2 wars, the British won against France and against the natives, but it got drained. Okay, so because of which it imposed taxes on the colonies. In March 1765, Stamp Act was passed. Okay, so which colonies did not like, and they raised the issue of no taxation without representation. Okay. Then here, some events took place. So Americans talk about this one event called Boston Massacre. Okay. So when you hear this word massacre, what do you think? Normally some great things happened and hundreds died. Do you know how many people died? 5 people. 5 people are called a massacre. Okay. And then they made it, see, look at this picture. Are you able to see the picture?
Yes, sir.
So this picture shows British troops firing on an unarmed crowd like this. But in fact, it did not happen like this. It didn't happen like this. It's a hugely exaggerated picture. What happened was, on March 5th, 1770, an altercation between British soldier and then some citizen, some Boston man, Bostonian. And then because of this altercation, some other Bostonians joined. People from Boston joined. So a soldier was trapped by the people. So a soldier was threatened. And then to defend him, 7 soldiers moved him. And then 200 Bostonians came. Okay. So in that conflicting situation, soldiers fired, resulting in 5 dead. Okay. It was not like peaceful protest and then the soldiers killed. It was not at all like that. Okay. So, but interestingly, though this event was used as a propaganda tool by the revolutionaries to exaggerate how unfair the British rule was, one by name John Adams, who would later become second president between 1797 to 1801, defended the soldiers on the ground that what they did was in self-defense. So, I mean, the interesting point is that somebody who would be a president defended the soldiers without not taking part in making them villains. And 2 of them were given minor punishment. His was a principled stand which got hostile reactions from the many. Okay. So where are we? Some conflict between 2 people, civilians joined, and soldiers threatened, and firing took place in self-defense. And this came to be called a massacre. Okay. So this event is remembered and talked about. Okay. Think of our Jallianwala Bagh event and things like that. Okay. But in the first place, why were the soldiers there? And also that event took place, there was already tension between the British and the Americans. On June 10th, 1768, in Boston, British customs officials seized HMS Liberty, a sailing boat for alleged smuggling. Okay. Why was to be seized because for smuggling? Because taxation was high. Taxation was high and people did not want, and probably that was encouraging smuggling, and they wanted to impose the taxes more strictly. And so on the ground that it was smuggling, the boat was seized. This resulted in a riot, due to which the custom officials were forced to flee. This led to the British Army being stationed there. So, higher taxation, people unwilling, but the taxes being forced resulted in tension. So, in that tense ambience, this small event took place. Okay, so this was called Boston Massacre. And next important event was Boston Tea Party. Okay, what is this Tea Party about? Tea Party, this event took place on December 16th, 1773. A group of men led by Samuel Adams, who are disguised as Native Americans, boarded the ship and dumped all the 342 chests of tea into the sea. This is supposed to be cost $1 million at the present prices. So this event took place on December 16, 1773. Why did this take place? This ship belonged to, this ship was importing tea into Americas. This tea was being sold at a much cheaper price by the British East India Company. Why was it in a position to sell at a much cheaper price? Because it got certain tax concessions. So people would get much cheaper tea, but then American merchants would lose. So American merchants did not like the favor that was being given to a British company. So they protested that their tea should not be imported. In fact, at other ports, they successfully protested and tea was not downloaded, not unloaded. Okay. But at Boston, the British official was very adamant. And so there people gathered and then they said, we should do something about it. Okay. So the rule was, the act allows company to sell tea in America without paying taxes except one particular tax. More than 80% of tea consumed was smuggled Dutch tea. So demonstrations against the act. So finally, the protesters prevented the tea from being landed. So it is in that context, these people went up the ship and they dumped them. Why did they have to disguise as Native Americans? Partly to disguise and partly to say that we were not the English. So we were Americans. Okay, but to say that they were Americans, they had to paint their faces like Native Americans. Okay, so that was a way to say that they were Americans and not the English. Okay, so this took place in 1773. And then the British definitely did not like this. And in reaction to this event, the British Parliament passed many acts which are called intolerable acts. Okay. What were the acts? Number one, the Boston Port Act, which said the port will be closed until the colonies paid for the cost for the destroyed tea. So pay for it, otherwise the port is closed. It means no more transactions, trade, no more trade. That's one. Next, Massachusetts Government Act. Boston comes under Massachusetts government. It said town meetings will be forbidden without approval. Okay, town meetings were held by the people to make certain decisions about the government. They said no. It means restricting self-government. And then third, Administration of Justice Act, which said that royal officials would be tried not on American soil, but in Great Britain. So officials would be taken to Britain and would be tried. Definitely, if they would be tried there, it would be much harsher compared to any official being tried on American soil before American citizens. So that was one. And next, Quartering Act, which allowed a governor to house soldiers in unoccupied houses and buildings in towns. So it means soldiers can go to any town and find houses unoccupied and they can stay there. Okay, which contributes to stationing troops in many towns. Okay, so why did Britain do it? Because Britain did not want to forgive Boston Tea Party and then go forward it wanted to punish. Okay, so this instead of putting down the resistance to the British rule, it antagonized them further. Okay, so it is then they started that they should do something together. Okay, then 56 delegates from the 12 of the 13 colonies, New York was not there, met in 1774, in October 1774 in Philadelphia, in what was called the First Continental Congress. It was decided that the colonies would boycott all the British goods. Okay. So when the Britain closed Boston port, these people said boycott the entire trade with the British goods. Okay. They also petitioned the King George to repeal these intolerable acts. Okay. But the King George was not willing, nor the British Parliament thought that they were doing something excessive against the American colonies. So the king issued a proclamation of rebellion. Okay. So these three things: Boston Massacre, 1770, Boston Tea Party, 1773, and then intolerable acts. So finally resulted in boycott of the British goods in 1774 by the colonies. Okay. So what was happening? This was happening in the context of new ideas and context of Britain involved in war, needing money, imposing taxes, and also favoring its own companies. So these people rebelled. Okay. So this led to war. Okay. War between the American colonies and the Britain. War began in April 1775. Okay. Boston Tea Party in 1773. Okay. So war in 1775. So patriots overthrew the existing governments in the 13 colonies and closed courts, drove away the British officials. Okay. But why did American colonies win? It was because, after all, these people were local and Britain was far away. And also, there was not much commitment from the British Parliament to give any extent of fight. In fact, British Parliament also was divided. So some thinking that America was after all right. Okay, so Britain was trying to control America and Americans were trying to defend themselves. So local versus foreign. Okay. And so success within years. And then finally, on July 4th, 1776, in Philadelphia, what is called Second Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence. Okay. Declaration of Independence. And in 1778, France joined American side. Why France joined? Because France was an old-time rival of Britain. So enemy's enemy is a friend. So the war effectively ended in October 1781. Okay. But it took some time for peace treaties to be signed. They are signed in 1783 and also 1784. And these treaties recognized 13 former colonies as sovereign states. Okay. And all these colonies put together, for the first time, a major state became a republic. Republic meant the ruler being elected. Switzerland became republic before the US, but it was too small. And the US Constitution was framed in 1789. And George Washington, who was the commander-in-chief of American Army, became the first president and ruled from 1789 to 1797. Okay. George Washington played a very important role in this warfare, and because of which he was hugely popular. So he was unopposed as a presidential candidate. Okay. In fact, if somebody had to be made a king, George Washington would have been a king. But they did not want to have a king. Okay. So they wanted to try something new. Okay. What they would try and what kind of ideals they would put forward is an issue which is of far more significance. Okay. We will stop here, then we'll discuss. Tell me, are the events look like the way I described, or my description was different from the events? What do you say? Do you agree with my understanding?
Yes, sir.
Because how can 5 people killed and that too policemen, soldiers kill them in self-defense is a big event, massacre. And Boston Tea Party, you know, these are some great events they talk about, and then they draw patriotism from that. What is all that? They're too small, aren't they?
Also, that observation of it is a fight among two privileged makes it even more less relevant to study, like, because natives were subordinated and all.
Natives were not there in this picture.
Natives were not there, so to call it something inspiring itself is.
So we will see what actually is inspiring and what is the significance. What did they do? Why did they do what they did? What happened? We will look into that. But tell me, are these events clear? Okay. Then we'll go to the next step. Any question?
Sir, what was the political system in Britain when US got constitution?
Because English Revolution took place in 1689 and monarch and the parliament. And parliament was powerful. King was nominal. This was happening after English Revolution, which we covered in the last class.
Right. No, the Britain had sub-states within, like they were sovereign, like the colonies of US.
No. The British Parliament had representation from all the property owners in Parliament. Even Britain was not based on universal franchise, universal adult franchise. Property owning men had representation in the Parliament. So in fact, it is they who sought rights. That was how right to property and taxation without representation meant that it is they who are being taxed by the king. So it was fight between landowners and the king.
So the Britain was not republic. Like why Americans thought that they should go for republic?
Because why was Britain republic? They were really confused. They tried something which Cromwell did, protectorate, and then it failed, and then they brought back the king. So they were continuing, whereas in America there was nothing to continue. They had to create a king, whereas Britain was dealing with a 1,000-year-old monarchy. So somebody experimented doing away without monarchy, and then system faced problems. So that was Cromwell's revolution. Cromwell killed the king, but then he himself did not become the king, and the people didn't know what to do. And then they brought the king. So Britain, remember, was going through incremental changes. So original things were happening in Britain and going through increments because they were happening for the first time in Britain. So what do second timers do? Second timers take the experience of the first timers and make it radical. For example, Nepal. I think Nepal's constitution may recognize rights to transgender. Why so? Because transgender issues are all, I don't know, I'll check, but transgender issues are already recognized. And so when Nepal is making the constitution, it will take the best.
Right.
So that
Also
is how
that
Indian constitution also is very radical. Why? Because all these revolutions took place. So what the problem with this is that you have a radical document, but the society may not be up to it. Whereas Britain won't face the problem. Because in Britain, things were evolved. They won't go more than what the society would allow them. They won't make radical statements. Okay. So because Britain was evolving, so they would go with the previous and make some modifications. So that's why they wanted to get rid of the king, but they failed. And so they brought back the king. And after that, they didn't see the need. Though people here still criticize why should these privileges be to royal families, and they should be an alternate.
Sir, in the America, there were natives, but they were not strong enough to fight the British.
That's true. That's true. That's
okay.
True. Okay. Now, can we go to the next section? Okay. Now coming to this, in my opinion, is a very significant point. This, I think, is, I would say, is the spirit of American Revolution, and I would say spirit of life. See, essentially, what happens sometimes is the event is small. Event is small. But then some people give such a theory to the event. This theory spreads. The significance of American Revolution is not that some people got power, but then for such a thing, instead of simply saying we got power and now we have the representation, they gave a radical ideology, almost only in words. Because events like this are an opportunity for some people to state change in terms of an ideal. In fact, we discussed Russian Revolution and Chinese Revolution also. King, unpopular, they wanted to change. But what is the ideology for the change? So when they proposed an ideology, they simply did not eliminate the problem and then replaced it with something better. But rather they replaced it with a far-reaching ideology. So then later people would ask, so is this the ideology on which we founded the state? That is what happened in American independence.
Sir, I did not understand. I did not understand.
An event could have been simply described as an event of change of power. They went and now we can rule. But then some people gave so much meaning to that event. They took it as an occasion to explain what we are going to do with this newfound freedom. They gave a theory, and theory was far more radical than those small events would suggest. Okay, maybe we'll continue and then you will understand. Okay, now, what is the theory? The theory is that, okay, fine. You want to ask? Okay,
Yes,
I will complete this. See, what is the theory? Theory is this. Okay, Declaration of Independence. Sorry. Let me. Okay. Declaration of Independence, 1776. Look at this document. See, they could have simply said, okay, we are forming a new state and now we are free from the British rule and we will favor our merchants and we will rule ourselves. Okay, we are no longer controlled by them. But then that is just not what they said. This Declaration of Independence was largely drafted by Thomas Jefferson, who became third president from 1801 to 1809. Okay. Look at what they declared. These are radical statements. So what did they do? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's a radical statement. Nobody said this before with such clarity. All men are created equal. What does it mean? This is a theoretical statement. They are not saying American merchants and English merchants are saying. Though at the time they were making, they didn't think of natives. They didn't think of even women. They didn't think of slaves. Three marginalized groups. But then they made this statement. All men are created equal. Okay. And then they said, to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the government. This again is to say, government is there on the basis of the consent, and consent is there on the assurance of these rights. Stating social contract theory very, very clearly. Inspired by Locke, inspired by English Revolution. And then it says that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. This is a call for a rebellion wherever the governments become unjust. Do you see? This is not about American merchants. This is about mankind, about government, about future. And they are saying it is on these principles we are going to found a new state. It's a radical document. So it is no longer power transfer. It is a promise that this state is going to be different. And nobody said it before. The Glorious Revolution did not unseat a king. They couldn't have said all men are created equal. So it is a huge step forward from no taxation without representation to all men are created equal. So this declaration, written by Thomas Jefferson, who is an extremely well-read person, makes it what are the ideals on which America is going to live by. These ideals are important because when a country is in crisis, they will refer back to these ideals and then ask what we are doing now. Lincoln, in his fight against slavery, said all men are created equal. This is the belief on which America was founded. Okay. So they are saying certain things which have profound significance. It is no longer American business interests versus British business interests. So the implication of stating something as an ideal is that even if those who are stating that ideal don't live by, later future generations will use, like Lincoln did, like many people later quoted this Declaration of Independence, said this is what we are here for. So there's a powerful message, all men are created equal. So America was only trying to find out and live up to what is meant by all men are created equal, because they have accepted it as a foundational principle. They didn't say Christians are superior. They didn't say people by birth are superior or whites are superior. No. So regardless of the social practices, they stated something. All men are created equal. So it states what is the relationship between man and what is the government for, what are its duties, and when it is the right of the people to reject the government, get rid of the government. And then they passed a series of amendments. For example, the First Amendment provides several rights protections to express ideas through speech and press, to assemble or gather with a group to protest or for other reasons, and to ask the government to fix problems. It also protects the right to religious beliefs and practices. Okay. is much, much more clearer compared to English Revolution, where the king is not free to practice his religion. He has to be a Protestant only. It prevents the government from creating or favoring the religion. Like this, 10 amendments are made. All these 10 amendments are called a Bill of Rights. They spell Americans' rights in relation to their government. This was adopted by the Congress in 1789 and ratified by most of the states by 1791. Okay. So, this is an ideological statement. Remember, a powerful country, which was not so powerful at that time. Later it would be powerful. But this is a revolution, second revolution after the English Revolution. So they created a theoretical framework for the government, amplified, clarified, which was not there in English Revolution. And this inspired many revolutions in Latin America. Wave of revolutions in the 18th and 19th centuries came to be known as Atlantic revolutions in Latin America. Okay. And then this one thing. And then some positive movement on slavery. Slavery was abolished in northern states by 1804. Okay. Southern states banned importing slaves because before the revolution, they were able to import slaves. That was banned. And also southern states allowed owners right to free their slaves. That also was not there before. It means some progressive change in southern states and abolished in northern states. Why these north-south differences? Because southern states' economy was based on slave labor. So they had more to lose by abolishing slavery. Whereas the northern states were more industrial. They did not depend on slavery. So changes could take place faster in northern states and not in southern states. And later, this would create a conflict of civil war. Okay. And Abraham Lincoln again quoted these principles by which America was founded. Okay. So America, whenever there is a crisis, it goes back to its principles and then asks, what are we here for? Are we going in the right direction? Okay. So though at the time there was slavery, no Latin American problem, no representation for Latin Americans. In fact, no representation unless you are a property owner. But America changed. Okay. But then America at that time was not the same thing as America now. So America later expanded. So British granted all land to the states. Okay, one casualty of the 1770s revolution was that several natives took part on the side of the British, thinking that they would be given freedom. But then the Britain just did not care about the natives. Some natives took part on the American side and some more on the British side, but it just did not matter. They had no role in the peace talks. And then soon after, America expanded, taking away many lands of the Indians. US expanded, acquiring more Indian land. Okay. So these are the effects. So what does all this mean? It provided an idea, though events were small. So out of those small events, an ideological state was created. And then it turned out the ideals on which it founded itself are more successful than any other ideals that were used to found a state. Until date, America seemed to have got its fundamentals right. Now tell me, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
So they were
So
radical statements.
so it is not the events in themselves, but that quality of leadership. At time they could see it as an opportune time to make radical statements.
Exactly. Thomas Jefferson did that. George Washington was just an army general. Jefferson was a thinker. Okay. So it was a new occasion. I mean, what I liked in that, I think that's true of life also. Events may be small, but what lessons you learn from those events, what implications and how you organize your life is a major thing. That I would say is a sign of intelligence. Okay. So they give a huge push to human progress. Obama also quotes any president, upcoming president, whenever there is a crisis, he goes back, say, what are we here for? That's how India also should be. Look at preamble. What are we here for? Okay. So the ideal should be right. And as of now, those ideals turned out to be superior to anybody else. And definitely they were making progress. They made so much of progress. And being a powerful country, it became an emulation for so many. Even now, it is easy to criticize American government. In fact, American government is criticized all over. American president is made fun of, written about. So much goes on in America. Whereas in India, it is very difficult. So you get best criticism against America from America only, like Noam Chomsky and others. They may be unfair vis-a-vis other countries, but within themselves, they're a lot more free. So what Britain achieved incrementally, step by step, in a confused way, Lord Protectorate, Cromwell, and then the king, getting him back, all kinds of things. So these people took stock of the whole thing and then made a radical statement.
Sir, I think
So
one dimension.
far ahead of what they were at that time. Those documents. In fact, Jefferson wrote anti-slavery also, but others put it down. They didn't want. Jefferson was far more radical. Please.
Sir, everything was fine, but you have missed one dimension there.
What is that?
What was that means? They are already elite.
Of course. They're already elite.
So, elite, and with this ideology, elite plus ideology mixed up and they grow.
Exactly. That's true.
But we cannot apply in the same context of ideology in every country, what I feel, because people might not understand.
That's true. Very much. Elite. But remember, they provided direction to the world by just choosing what they did. They provided direction, and I would say that was right direction compared to the direction China gave and giving, and Russia gave and giving. So they messed up. So American Revolution turned out to be, I would say, maybe probably the last useful, purposeful revolution. The French Revolution turned out to be a disaster. Russian Revolution a disaster. Chinese Revolution another disaster. Continuing disaster. American Revolution was the last thing that happened for the good of mankind.
there, there was a president was elected, sir. By that means.
Yes, president was elected, but not directly. We can discuss. It was about some electoral colleges. I mean, again, it had to do with how do you give enough representation to colonies, because it was not like India nation. It was like they were different colonies and came together to fight. And later they quarreled about what kind of a constitution they should be, how decentralized it was. There was gradualism. But till this point, they took away what all was achieved in the English context and made it a radical document. But English context was not good enough for them to find out how to live, what kind of arrangements they should have across the states, because English didn't face that problem. It was too small.
Sir, what happened to
So
South America?
revolution was an occasion which can go wrong. We discussed Lenin gave a horrible turn to mankind. Mao was thing. But American Revolution was not like that. It is still inspirational. All men are created.
There was a slogan we have.
Though
Highly illiterate people selected Mao as the leader, whereas quasi-literate people of Russia selected Lenin as the leader, and highly literate Germans selected Hitler as the leader. It's ultimately the people's making. But in American Revolution, what you find here is small events and great minds, elite minds.
Elite minds.
That's all.
Anyway, out of the small events only, they thought of bigger things. That is a sign of wisdom, intelligence.
Yes.
So I feel that unless we compare with Indian, we won't understand world history. It's so completely different, right? So in any YouTube video, they talk about only that. They don't compare what is our context and their context. Their independence, our independence, so completely different.
Even in questions, suppose in exam the question is on Russian or Chinese revolution, we can bring this point of how American Revolution is superior,
exactly,
either in conclusion or.
Of course, American Revolution. Still, that is the most powerful country, and because it got its ideology right. It got its ideology right. It is still right. Nobody found an alternative. You can criticize America. There is no end to criticism. But nobody could suggest a superior alternative. That's why I found Locke was one of the greatest thinkers, because we're still in that Locke's framework. There are rights, don't take away whatever you do. That is a powerful statement, because others did not respect those rights and messed it up in the name of trying to create equality. These people are extremely rich. Washington had many acres. Jefferson was a slave owner. But then he was against, he wanted slave abolition, though he himself didn't do it. And capitalism was an extension of right to create wealth, right to make money. So what went on gradually in a confusing way, haltingly in Britain, was brought here more logically with more clarity, and from a fresh beginning. So that became a template. And you can see people who tried to do something different failed. But they attempted more radical revolutions.